All right, so let's introduce Richard Wolfson. He is one of my oldest friends from Fairfield and is now in Canada. And we met maybe 8 years ago, and he's been doing always all kinds of unique things with yoga and science and consciousness. So, how about in your own words, Richard? Tell us a little bit about you and where your journey has taken you over the years.
Well, the things that are significant is becoming a teacher of transcendental meditations, and that brought me into the Vedic paradigm. Because Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of TM, that came from the Vedic paradigm in India. Then later, just jumping after I taught TM for many years, and I have a background in physics and science. I ended up getting it, but and bachelor's degree in physics and math, and then eventually a PhD in physics. But along the way, I also got a master's degree in Vedic science. And I worked for about 10 years running the video library at Maharishi International University. And I also learned Sanskrit and studied a lot of the Vedic literature, including the Yoga Sutras, which I'm particularly interested in. So that's sort of like a bit of a thumbnail. So when I got a master's in Vedic science and I was studying the Vedic literature and I was running the video library at MIU and having to learn a lot about Vedic knowledge. And then eventually now, in looking at the Yoga Sutras and after practicing meditation for so many years, I'm all of a sudden one day and I had a realization about how simple it was. And that's where this idea of like the first word of the Yoga Sutras is now. And Maharishi had explained that the first word of the Vedic literature is sort of like the seed form of all like the Veda of that Vedic literature. Like the first word of the Rig Veda is Agni, and everything comes out of Agni. Then and the first word of the Vedic of the Yoga Sutras is Atta. And it's actually interesting because I met someone with the name Atta, and then I was reflecting on that. This girl from Europe, no, actually from Iran. Her name was Atta, and I said, Atta, I know that word. Then I started reflecting on it. It was the first word of the Yoga Sutras, and I think then I was realizing I woke up in the middle of the night, oh my God, the whole Yoga Sutras unfolds from that word now. And then it sort of started, um, making more and more sense. So that's how I ended up putting this presentation together. Over time. It became more and more clear how everything in the Yoga Sutras just comes out of now because it's just be in the now. Like be in the now is don't get caught worrying about the future or what happened in the past, just be in the now. And that's how this came out, this presentation on the yoga of now, the yoga of being in the now. And then all of the different strategies of the Yoga Sutras, the 8 limbs of yoga fit into that paradigm. And it's so simple. So that's what I wanted to share.
Cool. So, how would you say, a lot of what you learned and have studied over the years is really technical, a lot of technical sciences and technical procedures, but it sounds like you also have a deep connection to your own inner creative process where, you have that spontaneous inspiration in the night and it brings you closer to the way to explain something technical. So I wonder how you would describe just briefly in your own words how that balances for you, like being more technically minded but also having a creative process flow.
Well, it all seems to boil down to listening to your inner voice or listening to my inner voice. And that's actually um, one of these limbs of yoga to realize, oh my God, that's all it's saying. Is because I I also took a yoga course and I'm also interested in self-development. That's the thing. And the main thing is like over the years, I've seen many different healers and teachers and stuff like that. And then more recently, it realized everything comes from within. To just, if you're running around trying to get someone else to guide you, you're kind of lost. You have to listen to your inner voice. So, and Yoga Sutra is like part of that. These strategies is that listening to your inner voice. So that's kind of like the thing that my inner voice is like tells me, oh, this is what that means, and this is what that means, and this is what that means. And the more I just do it I'm told and write down like this PowerPoint presentation. It just came in bits and pieces. I'll wake up. Oh, this insight comes. I better write that down. This insight comes. Because if I don't write it down, it drives me crazy. It's kind of like my inner voice is sound like I'm my case. So in order to get it off my case, I have to write these pieces. And the same thing happens when you're running into like a physics problem sometimes. It requires insight. You have to kind of let go in the middle of the night and oh, here's the idea that comes. So it's basically, letting go of your individuality a little bit and just going with the flow. That's probably like the common thing. And that's what this presentation is. It was just, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is, my journey in life is listening to my inner voice, and wherever that leads me, that's my journey. And basically this presentation or this yoga of now is basically helping other people get in touch with their inner voice so they can be in tune with their own journey.
That's awesome. I can totally relate to what you say about like that sometimes the inner voice just gives you no choice. Like it bugs you. It's when you know an idea is really important for not just you, but for sharing and that sounds like that's what part of what this is. And there's also an interesting paradox. I feel like I wonder before you go ahead and get started showing your presentation, I wonder if you could comment a little bit on the paradox of how a lot of teachings tell you to find your inner voice, and as much as you don't need the teachings to get to the inner voice, sometimes you do. Like, you don't need a teacher unless you think you do need a teacher. Like, almost, some people spontaneously do things on their own without any guidance, but there are like little bits and pieces of almost pushes towards your inner voice that a mentor or a teacher can give you. So maybe even just reflecting on, yeah, the more pivotal moments of when you've been guided towards your own inner voice by someone else, just to comment on that paradox.
It's well, the paradox for me is it's kind of like knowing when the time is to drop a teacher. Because sometimes I don't know if I should give this now, not truth, but it's like when the COVID thing came out. And at that point, I've been really involved in the TM movement. And then it started being pro-vaccine. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, that was like a life-changing experience, which woke me up and realized something is wrong. It's all, and it was like we call that kind of experience when you're like being reborn. There's a word for it, not but anyhow, it's like something that really shakes you up. It's sort of like there are certain points when you go with a teacher and the teacher is helping you and guiding you, then all of a sudden you realize that you needed to get this point to realize you don't need this teacher anymore, that they were, and almost the purpose of that teacher was for you to come to the realization um, of what was lacking so you could go beyond it. So teachers can take you a certain point and then you have to be strong enough to not be a sheep and realize when you're just being a sheep and you're like following the crowd, because that's never going to lead you anywhere. Somehow you have to learn to listen to your voice. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's sort of like my experiences are like going on a certain route, then all of a sudden you something doesn't feel right, you have to move along. And for me, it often happens that I don't have a choice. Like when I was left Fairfield, nature sort of like set conditions up that I had to leave Fairfield, and it forced me to leave the people that were guiding me in the TM movement and elsewhere behind in order to find my inner voice again. So sometimes it's me that makes the intellectual decision, but a lot of the times it's just I'm like kicked by nature, kicked out of my current situation. And when I was sick in India, I got really sick, and it sort of made me, and it was forcing me to realize the path that I was on in India wasn't the right path. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it tells you some of my experiences of being with a teacher, then you realize you're sort of kicked and realize you need to stand on your own now.
Yeah, I like that. And especially it seems really pivotal on like some form of intolerance where um, the movement was intolerant with people that were not taking vaccines, or some teachers will have something that is a requirement that's very strong. And when there's that intolerance that is up against your own inner voice, that's sort of a natural a graduation from whatever wisdom was there, is kind of what I heard from what you were saying.
Yeah. And even more than that, that person was actually that like your teacher was actually created by you so you could have that realization. So it's not like there was nothing wrong with them. They were actually put into your life in order for you to get to the realization to go on to the next step. So they did you a favor because they sort of shook you up when you needed to be shaken up so you could like graduate onto the next stage. And then you look back and you realize people that are still in that stage that you were at, and they can't, and they're not going beyond, and you just kind of realize, okay, they've got their path. They don't see what I see, or their path is different or something, and you end up like leaving people behind that are like are not moving on in the same direction you are.
Absolutely. And it also reminds me of another form of graduation from someone you're learning from is when you realize you're both, rather than having a teacher and a student, when you start to blur those lines because you both have things to teach each other. And that's a different form of graduation. Like now we're equals that we can collaborate versus we're at an impasse that we must, split.
Yeah, I like that. Though some teachers are not ready to do that, and then you realize they're caught in their role, and they're not ready to sort of take feedback and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's what we're cultivating too with quantum mentors, especially, is the kind of teachers who can also be students of their teachers. Like, Sophie, she's a student of ours, Ashley's daughter, and
Oh,
so she's been learning from me different things, and she's also taught me to do origami, which is so cool. Like everyone has different strengths, and I think learning really changes when the teacher is open to learning. Like even in the classroom with these kids in art class, like they are so funny the things they want to teach me, like this trending dance or something, and then I do the trending dance, and all of a sudden we have a whole different relationship because I was open up enough to learn from them, not just make it about top down learning.
yeah, I like that. Oh, yeah, yeah, I definitely have areas for learning, so that's great. I mean, you've got a lot of technical skills and creative skills and presentation skills and things that I'm sure would be helpful for me. So it'd be fun working in quantum mentors.
Cool. So, yeah, why don't you get started showing me some of your slides and I can maybe jump in and ask you questions if I have a question?
Okay, let's see. Okay, I do have the ability to share. Okay, let's see. I think this is it. And let's see if I can go to slideshow. from the beginning. Okay, so can you see this all right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me move something. Okay, so yoga, now yoga, yoga to cultivate the state of now. What is yoga? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is the foundational text of yoga. How does it define yoga? So first I have a picture of Maharishi Patanjali. There's a couple representations of him. And of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was the one who initiated me into the knowledge of meditation and Vedic knowledge. Okay. And I've got all, oh, I have to keep moving this panel. So what is the first sutra or first verse of Yoga Sutras? It says, now is the teaching on yoga. And most of the translators of the past translate this as now begins the teaching of yoga. So it's a very boring sort of thing. And then I realized, no, what it's really saying is the word now is the core teaching of yoga. Be in the now. So if, just from that, everything in the whole Yoga Sutras and the theory of yoga unfolds. The first word encapsulates the entire teaching. So the teaching is be in the present. Now is the only reality that exists. And in terms of states of consciousness, um, I call this a cosmic consciousness perspective, like the more common understanding of or translation about, now I'm going to start teaching yogas. That's more a waking state, and there'll also be a unity consciousness perspective later. But be in the now. Don't get caught up in random thoughts that drag you into the past or worrying about the future. And how to do this. And let me know when you want to jump in. But the first two or three slides just are straight from the Yoga Sutras. So this is the second verse of the Yoga Sutras, and it says, yoga is the complete settling, or yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the complete settling of the vrittis of the mind, the activities, which means like the random thoughts. Some people translate it as the control of the activity of the thoughts of the mind, which it makes it seem really straining, but it's the settling, the calming of the mind. So to experience the now, we need to quieten down our monkey mind so it's not jumping all over the place. How to settle the mind. The 8 limbs of yoga provide a comprehensive set of tools to calm the mind and establish, so we live in the state of now. So this is the last 2 verses that we're going to quote right now. Verse 3 and 4 clarify what this state of now is. And part of the reason that stimulated me to do this presentation is a friend of mine said, I'm not interested in such and such as I'm more into being in the now. And then I said, so what is the state of now? And she had no idea. So then I said, so what is the state of now? It made me think. When you're in the state of now, which means you're in the present, you're not worrying about the future or the past, then the observer is establishing self-awareness. That's what the 3rd verse says. And when you're establishing the self-awareness, the vrittis means the thoughts of the mind emerge from self-referral state and remain there within self-referral state. We're not kind of like jumping all over the place from about past memories or worries of the future. So in the state of now, thoughts arise from and stay connected with self-referral awareness, which means one's inner voice or higher self, which is connected to cosmic intelligence. So one's in touch with our inner voice rather than all these worries and anxieties and traumas and stresses from the past. And the rest of the chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras described how when thoughts instead are colored by worries and stresses and impressions, we get into pain and suffering and we're kind of not in the now. Then, uh, so then that was the first couple slides that give an introduction. Now let's move on to chapter 2, the 8 limbs of yoga, which is the practical tools for cultivating the state of now. So this shows how everything arises. So the Yoga Sutras, this book, is very comprehensive. It starts with a few verses which just explain the goal. Then it spends the rest of chapter 1 explaining all the problems that come up and all the types of pain and suffering if we're kind of like getting caught in past impressions. So let's go. The 8 limbs of yoga. Now I'm going to list them all, and then maybe we'll get through the first one of them, which is really neat. That's a great thing I'm really happy about. The 8 limbs of yoga. There are 8 complementary strategies for calming the mind and cultivating the state of now. And these physical exercises, hatha yoga is just one of them, one of the 8 limbs. So the first limb is called Yama. And Yama is sometimes considered to be the god of death. That's sort of that kind of translation. But Maharishi explained it's the principle of like silence, the principle of absolute emptiness. It's just the sort of misunderstanding. It's personified as a person, but it's really an experience, silence. The second of these 8 limbs of yogas is behavioral guidelines. And that has to do with listening to your inner voice. The third one is these postures, stretches with attention. There'll be insights on that as well. They vary. And pranayama, the breathing exercises. And then pratyahara, which is really also is a new insight on, is turning the senses inward, but it's like really studying the senses so that we're not constantly getting knocked back and forth and all over the place by getting lost whenever something flashes at us or we get caught on the computer or whatever. Then those are the first 5 limbs of yoga, and they're considered external. There's 3 more limbs. The last 3 limbs are internal, and dharana is called steadiness or focus. Dhyan, meditation, and samadhi is like the state of enlightenment or transcendental consciousness or higher states of consciousness. So I'm just giving an overview now. And these 3 together are called samyama, which means unified with yama, or unified with silence. So how does the first limb, yama, cultivate the state of now? So if it's okay with you, I'll just proceed to the first one because it's like one of the most interesting. There's like a conservative way to understand them, then there's a more insightful way.
I have one question before you continue. I know your mentor strategy is generally geared towards adults, correct?
Um, I I guess it generally is right now, but we could think about it for, you're right, because it's like practicing meditation stuff. It, this would be interesting for me and you to work together after you've seen it to help sort of rewrite it in a way that relates more to children connecting with their inner voice or anybody. It's sort of like it's a way of connecting with the inner voice. And I think like in the first one is yama, which ends up being, well, I don't know, but let me explain the yamas and then see if you can, because it's like it's got a visualization technique in, and that could be helpful for kids. And the second one is a way of surrendering to one's inner voice, so that could be helpful for kids. The third one is like exercises like that are whether it could be baseball or whatever works for you. And it's a way of telling, you know, not straining when you're doing exercise and things. But so the more I think about it, probably could be adapted either way. Let's get through this first one, and then you tell me whether this visualization technique would be helpful for kids.
Okay.
Maybe it would. So yama has five components, which are called the five yamas. So I'm going to explain it one way, which is the more traditional way, which is sort of boring, and then the way in terms of a visualization technique. They're so they're commonly understood as like ideal practices, so like rules of daily life. It's like the first one is non-violence, ahimsa, which some people translate as meaning like don't step on any ants, which is kind of boring. The second one is like telling the truth, not lying. This is the classical understanding. The third one is not stealing, like your friend's milk out of the fridge. Fourth one is translated as celibacy, brahmacharya, or energy directed upward, which sort of turns people off. The fifth one is commonly translated as giving all your possessions away, like going to live in a cave. So these are really impractical, or for some people, are not. But now, next slide, a deeper understanding of these five yamas. And this is kind of one of the most um, inspiring things for me is when I realized the five components of yama are like can be understood as a five-step process to enliven one's inner silence. And that can be helpful whether one's, an adult or a child, like wanting to get in touch with your inner silence. And this is like a technique you would do lying down. And yoga nidra is a word for these type of techniques that you might do lying down in bed at night. And I do this every night. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't get to sleep, I start doing this simple technique. And you can feel the creativities and the settling at the same time. So first step is close your eyes. The second step, which was, translated on the previous page is non-violence, is really surrender. That's fulfilled by surrendering to unconditional love for everyone and everything. So maybe you can think of someone who has the quality of love in your life, whether it's your teacher, your if you're into religion, it could be Jesus. If you go to a massage therapist that you really like, who's always got an overflowing heart like I do. It's like just reminding me that, and a chiropractor, these people in your life that have unconditional love, just bring them into your awareness, and that quality of unconditional love comes. So you're sitting there, you're in unconditional, eyes are closed, sitting in unconditional love. And the second step, satya, which was the state of truthfulness, what you do is just within that love, just be aware of your body, because that brings you into the here and now, the state of truthfulness. So you're sitting in love, you just become aware of your body, because if your mind is floating all over the universe, worrying about the past and the future, you just start being aware of your body, and that grounds you to the earth, to the here and now. So and then the third step, Asteya, which was non-stealing, it's really talking about the state of unity when you're everything. So instead of being within that love, let your body awareness expand to encompass the entire universe. So you're sitting there, the first step, you're sitting in unconditional love, then you just become aware of your body, and then you just let your body awareness expand to the universe, and you're aware of the whole universe, and you're still floating in unconditional love. And it's like a blissful thing to do, something you do at night. You can do in bed. Then once there, your mind starts cycling between the three of them, from your body to the universe to love and back again. And that's what this brahmacharya means. Brahma means wholeness, charya means seated. So you just like seated in wholeness. You're just sitting there feeling your awareness go back and forth from your body to the universe to love, cycling back and forth. And this creates increasing waves of love and wholeness. So you're just floating in that wholeness, floating in those waves of love. So you're connecting to your inner silence, your inner creativity. And especially if you're bothered by something during the day, or it could be like maybe someone got mad at you, or you lost something, or there's something you're worrying about, you can't fall asleep at night. You sit there, you do this process, and everything else falls away. You're sitting in the present, you're feeling these waves of love. And then the last step is non-possession is really, I call it witnessing. You're just experiencing yourself as an ocean of love, witnessing the process. You're just surrendering. So this takes you out of all that anxiety or whatever's going in your mind into that state of eternal love. So it brings you into the now. So this is a simple process, and it could be just be interesting to do this with a group of kids, have them lying down on a mat and just go through this and see. Maybe it'd be good preparation before they do some sort of an art project. Because if they especially if they come in, you know, wired by something that happened during the day or something they're worried about. And then this brings them into that state of inner creativity, their own inner silence. And then they can proceed into their art project.
Yeah, I like the mental health angle for sure for kids to use it as a tool to release stress. It reminds me of how the meditation technique would be, um, it would be a walking meditation for kids rather than a seated meditation.
Yeah,
What came to my mind is maybe the stillness is something that would probably be a big challenge, but in different situations, depending on some variables, usually kids want to move around. That I like the idea though of having them think of someone like a teacher or parent or family member or friend that embodies these qualities, and then maybe even ask them if it inspires any movement. Then they could just almost express what that unconditional love looks like expressed in movement rather than in stillness as a kind of a creative exercise. And then from there, to have things for them to picture, I feel like they would probably need a few more visual, they would probably need guidance through visuals, almost like a guided meditation, rather than saying like going from here to the cosmos, to give them that step by step. Okay, now picture your yard, and then picture your town, and then picture your state, and then
yeah.
fill up this your state with this unconditional love, and then fill up your country, and see how big it can start to go in steps for them to actually have visuals to follow. I could see that being a really interesting experience for kids.
Yeah. And then allow them to express either through some drawing a picture or something or other. Yeah,
Yeah,
this could be, yeah, I like your idea. It's sort of like turning, yeah,
yeah, that would even be a fun thing for an adult to do. The thing is, whenever I um, adapt something from adults to kids, it usually involves more images and more art. And then I think, well, why are we depriving ourselves of this as adults in the first place? Because images are really great for adults too. Imagine just sitting down with a paper trying to draw what it looks like to expand that unconditional love across the universe. Everyone would have a really different way of expressing it on paper with color.
yeah, I like that because sort of like this particular exercise as I sort of did it is like kind of like how I do it, which is like a technique I do at night, before going to bed. But but it could, I like your idea, turning this into an activity during the day. That was what came to me because that was what works for me. But the same 5-step process could be, adapted to, a more creative, like 5 steps of teaching going through, just like you said. So that's great. So we're kind of like turning this into something. So that was the first of the 8 limbs of yoga. So we just turned that into something that would work for kids in a way, or we're starting to.